Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Project Catalyst podcast and vodcast series, where you'll find a range of conversations with me, Kim Clyden. Today, the increasing severity of extreme weather events, changing climate conditions, sea level rise, water contamination and soil degradation are listed by the state government as some of the challenges facing agricultural producers in Queensland. However, according to many farmers, human capital remains the most immediate threat to productivity and supply chains. Many regions find themselves in a catch-22, where even if they can get seasonal staff, the housing crisis means they may not be able to accommodate them. In Mackay, a number of organisations and agencies are discussing how multiple levels of government are required to address the situation. I sat down with CEO of Regional Development Australia, Cocco, to gain some perspective of the issues and their relevance.
We could probably have 3 hours on the podcast around housing in terms of what the various issues are that are impacting on that. But look, I think in terms of agricultural-based workforce, we've had significant feedback, particularly predominantly from the horticultural industry to date around the challenges that they've had. In terms of the sugar stuff, yes, there are some challenges, although it must be said probably the feedback from the industry hasn't been overly strong in terms of significant challenges in terms of housing for the sugar industry, particularly relative to aquaculture and horticulture, who have been by far the probably more vocal and involved in some of the housing issues. So the projects and initiatives that we're doing within this region, particularly through the Greater Whitsunday Housing Alliance, which is a collective of stakeholders from multiple industries and the housing and development sector, is looking right now at the development of additional workforce accommodation housing, not specifically like mine camp operation and setups, but something that are perhaps a little bit more medium term. So instead of being short-term accommodation as in a month or X number of weeks, this is sort of opportunity to see businesses working with those developers to basically offer 3 months, 6 months, 12 months style of workforce accommodation.
This isn't something new. When I moved here in 1998, there were issues with accommodation and finding rentals then. What are some of the drivers of what we're seeing currently across the spectrum?
Fundamentally, there's been about 40% reduction in rental availability over the last 3 years, talking with the real estate agents. That's been predominantly due to lack of new builds. So new people coming into the region have opted to buy existing property. We've seen a number of rental property owners effectively cash out over the last 3 to 4 years. So as I said, that 40% reduction in total regional rental volume is obviously really significant. And we're currently not seeing, obviously, the significant increase in the number of new rental properties being built. A range of reasons for that from coming out of the work that we've done as part of the Regional Housing Alliance. There's no doubt some of the more recent legislative-based changes that state government and others have implemented around controls around rental landlord operations behaviour and that sort of stuff has had an impact on what I would call mum and dad landlords, basically saying, look, it's just all too difficult. All this red tape and stuff that we've got to do, we're just not interested. We're just going to sell our property and go and invest our money into share market or some other based investments.
This is not an isolated thing for the Mackay Whitsunday Isaac region. It extends right throughout Queensland. So how do we compare when looking at regional areas of Queensland?
So undoubtedly this region is tighter than other regions. So we have less available rentals. We have a pretty stagnant development numbers in terms of approved new housing developments that are actually going ahead. We have plenty of land that's available, so the local governments in right across our region, particularly Mackay Whitsundays, have available and approved land for development, but we're not seeing investors basically flocking to the region to build new property. There's probably a number of reasons for that, even in terms of with the first home buyers grants that are available right now. we're seeing, a small take-up of that within the region, but once again, nothing like we're seeing, for instance, in the southeast corner.
So what about the Burdekin and further into Hinchinbrook and the northern areas of Queensland? I mean, are we in similar situations to Townsville, Cairns and the outlying regions?
Yeah, look, most of regional Queensland is basically in the same boat. The drivers are a little bit different between different regions. So, for instance, the drivers for us out at Moranbah, Dysart, Collinsville are different to the coast, and our drivers, from talking with other RDAs and other stakeholders in other regions of Queensland and regional Queensland in particular, there are nuances of differences, I suppose, but the overarching issue is consistent. So effectively, lack of housing volume, real challenges in terms of lack of social and affordable housing for those that are perhaps a little bit more disadvantaged within our communities. And that really is off of the back of a significant level of non-building of social and affordable housing over the last decade, and not keeping pace, with that demand. The other issues, as I said, that we're seeing right across regional Queensland, with some slight differences in Whitsundays, sort of Early Beach area, Cairns also a little bit. But if you look at the rest of regional Queensland, fundamental population growth's been pretty slow over the last decade. So, in more recent times, post-COVID, a little bit of recovery, but what people also need to look at is not just the people moving in, but who's leaving as well. So you actually need to look at net population, not just who's coming in.
COVID seems to have changed so much about the way our communities function, and particularly the economics across all of those areas. What is it about COVID, from your perspective, that is driving some of the inflationary changes we see in our outlook?
Yeah, undoubtedly, influences on supply chain have been really profound. Increased in cost, in fundamental unit costs to basically move product from point A to point B. Obviously, a lot of the product coming into Australia is imported, particularly shipping costs and containerisation costs and that sort of stuff are nearly quadrupled what they were pre-COVID in many instances. Off of the back of that, we've also seen globally, particularly in the immediate post-pandemic sort of period, a significant level of global recovery. So a lot of construction, a lot of activity, which has then put strain on producers of those fundamental products and not having enough volume of product produced. And then everything becomes really competitive. Then you're competing for bags of nails and gyprock and all this other stuff. Then obviously Australia is also still relatively isolated from a geographical perspective. So it takes more effort to actually get product here from a number of sourcing countries. We're in the Southern Hemisphere and all those sort of issues start to play as well. So we are seeing, perhaps over the last couple of years, that starting to normalise a little bit. I don't think it'll ever go back to pre-COVID base levels because the market's just shifted in terms of that. But we are, I suppose, seeing the continual rise isn't necessarily there on all products. We have, particularly in the building industry, there are some products as a result of things like floods, bushfires and other events that have occurred will continue to have short-term challenges in terms of volume of supply, because there's lots of product, for instance, going to a particular area that's recovering from a natural disaster. But those challenges were still there even pre-COVID in terms of that as well. But no doubt a fundamental shift in the supply chains in particular, which are seeing this sort of increase in consumable costs.
It seems like almost an insurmountable problem for regional areas, because if we don't improve our population or per capita, we don't also get the flow-on effects of investment into health, education and all of those other, federal or state-run things. So what's the answer here?
So I think there's a couple of things that can be done. So from an RDA perspective, both in terms of ourselves here, but also as part of a coalition or an alliance collaboration of northern RDAs. So there's 8 northern RDAs across northern Australia, and recently just came from a meeting with all the Queensland RDAs down in Brisbane. There's probably a couple of things we can start to look at. I think one is both within Australia and within Queensland, we don't really have a population strategy. There isn't a population management strategy that's currently active. So we would argue that one of the underpinning core components here is how do we actually start to embark on a strategy that actually repopulates, particularly regional areas and regional Queensland, There's been a number of reports over the last few years that claim that all these people are flocking to the regions. When you look at the data, that actually doesn't hold up in regional Queensland. So there might be some isolated areas, pockets that are doing really well. But on the whole, the numbers don't look great and haven't looked great for some time. Undoubtedly, what we're seeing in Queensland is a strong movement of people to Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, sort of within that 2-hour drive of Greater Brisbane, and those areas under the current classifications are called regional Queensland. They're probably more, becoming outer suburbs of Greater Brisbane. But nonetheless, as I said, so our view would be that, population strategy, the management of that, almost like strategic targets on how and what would flow from that then is then additional policy that actually helps that. We do get feedback that says, oh yeah, but if you do that, then we'll have even more housing strain and all the rest of it. But I think what people are forgetting is that we need investment into the region, and what comes with population growth is confidence from investors and builders and mum and dads and other people to invest. We also then start to get better economies of scale for things like digital connectivity services, health services, social support services, education, the list just goes on and on. So when you're in a declining population or even a fairly stagnant population, it's hard to sell to whether they be public or even private investors that investment and that growth, which then actually triggers that broader supply chain spend and sort of almost like internal spin within a community.
From where I sit, it's a very much a chicken and egg situation, and we've actually witnessed millions upon millions of dollars being invested into the southeast corner pre-COVID, and a lot of it coming out of regional areas from tourism, agriculture, and particularly mining for a lot of our centres from here to Townsville. How do we then reinvigorate that investment and get people excited about the regional areas of Queensland?
One of the opportunities is, I think, to rebrand a little bit the regions. So there is a bit of a perception by some people, particularly those in perhaps our capital city areas, that don't really fully understand regional Queensland or regional Australia for that matter. And I think part of that's built around a lot. If you actually look and read a lot of the dialogue that comes out of regions, we spend a fair bit of time talking about what we don't have, not necessarily what we do have.
Banging on about how bad the roads are, there's no investment in this. Why would you?
Yeah, we've got no good digital connectivity, all the rest of it. And I think, look, some of that's obviously true depending on your situation, but once again, if we look at Mackay and the broader region, 97% of the households here have pretty good digital connectivity. Understanding once you get further away from the sort of the metro-y type area of even Mackay, that obviously starts to deteriorate pretty quickly. But the reality is that it's not like we're a third world country area. So I think at times we're a little bit of our worst enemy here, in that if you want to encourage people to come, then you don't just talk about all the bad things or the things that aren't working. You actually spend probably more time talking about why it's great to live here and why I've chosen to live here and what the good things are about here. Like I can leave home and be at work in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it might be.
Not only that, you've got access to beautiful, waterfalls and rainforests, and then on the other side, beaches and beautiful tropical islands.
Yeah, that's right. And I think for most people that live in their part of the world, in regional Queensland, there's a reason why they chose to live there, because they like it or love it or whatever it might be. And I think, as I said, the one thing, that'd probably be my one comment, is how do we get better at selling the good things, not as well as obviously there's a requirement to highlight the things that need improving, but perhaps it's just the language in which we couch that. So, because quite often, and I've been to plenty meetings around regional development, and the meetings will spend 3/4 of the time talking about all the problems of what we don't have, and we spend 1/4 of the time talking about what we do have and what's great. And so if that's the communication, then not surprisingly, why would I want to move there?
Well, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else, and I've lived in a lot of cities. So I think, those benefits, as you say, need to be touted a little bit more. But there's also perception. And I think because we are quite, we live distances from even our regional neighbours, where it's 4 hours to the next town or centre or major centre. So, the tyranny of distance along with the associated industries is another aspect. A lot of agriculture, a lot of mining.
I think, undoubtedly both those industries are what I would call mainstay heritage industries, have been the fundamental fabric of a lot of regional Queensland. And there is no doubt that, we're seeing how some of those industries are transforming themselves even, so that there's still fundamental need to produce fundamental food that we consume and eat, as an example for agriculture. But we're also seeing those industries starting to embark on new opportunities. So sugar's a classic example around, even since the 70s and 80s, there was talk around, the role that ethanol and biofuels and other things can play. It's not necessarily new, but the effort and the activity that's occurring, particularly in a number of regions through North Queensland, around aviation fuels being derived from sugar and sugar-oriented feedstock, a whole range of new pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals and fermented-based products, and even, dare I say it, producing meat out of sugar, and all these sort of bits and pieces are, once upon a time, was sort of like the Jetsons type of considerations are actually happening right now. So we've got investment and investors looking at right through North Queensland, basically right at this moment, basically looking at those sort of opportunities. So I think there's a real opportunity there that, yep, the fundamental industry will be there, but the opportunities on what it ultimately produces as product, we'll still see a continuation of sugar. But we'll actually see these other products come into the mix as well. So just on that, a lot of people sort of run down the value of sugar as a product and all the rest of it. The one thing that a lot of people forget about is that sugar is a key fundamental ingredient for actual food preservation. So our ability to feed the world actually requires the use of things like sugars, spices, fats and oils and that sort of stuff, which actually preserve food product and actually extend shelf life. And so, and that will continue to be the case given the challenges we face, sort of, needing to feed the world. So it's not really, in my view, an issue of sugar not being there. It's just an opportunity to say, hey, we can actually produce some other products as well, which are higher value. They won't necessarily be the total product that is produced, but actually offer some, diversity and some additional choice.
Over the last 25 years, we've seen a major focus on developing the resources sector. There's obvious reasons for that. What role do you think that's played in the perception of regional areas like Mackay, Townsville and beyond?
Oh, look, I think fundamentally for Mackay, you talk with most people pre the mining game, Mackay was a sugar town. Fast forward through to now, it's perceived as a mining town. So, and you've only got to look at the employment numbers, the economic revenue that's generated out of those respective industries, and you can understand why people have that sort of view. It's not that agriculture or even tourism or other things aren't occurring. It's just that they're dwarfed from a numbers perspective compared to one particular large industry. So, but even that industry, like as time advances, we will see the mining industry equally playing a critical role in not only, mining for fundamental coal-based product in terms of metallurgical coal in our region, but there will be other products that are known, that already exist within the overburden and the other bits and pieces, so that are available in the region. So, everyone's talking about critical minerals, and rightly so. There's a major opportunity around critical minerals and rare earths and the like. But there'll be other products that can equally be, that are known to be in the region that require mining, haven't necessarily been looked at too much in the past because there's more money to be made out of metallurgical coal and other coal-based products. But I can see these companies transitioning when the time is right into continued mining. It'll just be a mining for another product.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to see that. I mean, the last I heard about some of the rare earth minerals particularly, they wanted to get them on the moon. So that whole industry is going to be a very interesting space to watch.
Yeah, look, and perfect example. So we now have a spaceport in Bowen. 6-7 years ago, RDA started the discussions with Gilmore Space Tech around the opportunities of exploring a spaceport at Abbott Point. Now, I've got to be honest with you, everyone thought we'd been eating some magic mushrooms or something like that at the time. But fast forward through to now, give it hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll see the first rocket launch effectively at the launch site. If you talk with Gilmore Space and the other proponents around space, they're envisaging a future where we actually inhabit space and inhabit places like the moon. People might think that a bit fanciful, but the reality is, as I said, 6-7 years ago, no one thought we could put a spaceport at Abbott Point either. So I think, it's good to have these sorts of people with these altruistic sort of ambitions and aspirations that they want to try and achieve. And what I think we'll see from that one example is that spaceport and the work that Gilmore is doing will generate a new generation of young kids and others from Bowen who have got an interest in space travel and space engineers and all that sort of stuff, or whatever it is, So the context of them just thinking about the type of jobs that their mums and dads did will be completely turned on its head because they're seeing what would never been thought about in terms of an opportunity. So.
That's Rob Cocco, CEO of Regional Development Australia for Mackay with Sunday, speaking about the factors influencing the housing crisis and worker shortages throughout the regions. For more stories like this, connect with us on our website, projectcatalyst.net.au, and social media channels. You'll find us on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Project Catalyst is funded by the partnership between the Australian Government's Reef Trust and the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, and the Coca-Cola Foundation with support from WWF Australia.